Well, dude, Manti, good to be here, man.
It's good to be here, brother.
Yeah, we're both looking fresh. I think Peter took care of both of us today, dude.
You tell me what you was at 11:30?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was at 8:30.
Dude, he's the best, man.
Yeah.
I love that guy. And it's fun because that's where we first met, actually. And he's so funny. He's always, one thing I love about him, love about just these kind of people I try to surround myself with is people that are always going out of their way to try to help others. He's always doing that. And he'll like ask me, he's like, hey, this guy wants to meet you. Do you care if he comes and gets his hair cut after you and then you guys can connect? And I've ended up becoming friends with a few of these guys. He's just always looking out for everybody. And so
I like Peter because Peter was the first barber that I've had that gave me kind of tips on what he thinks will work with how my head's shaped, and I don't think you should do this with your hair. And sometimes he'll cut my hair a certain way, like to go forward, and sometimes I'm lazy and I'll pull it back. And he's like, "Listen, bro, I saw a picture of you doing a speaking engagement, and if you want to put your hair back, I gotta cut it a certain way, So that's the first time that I've been with somebody that kind of looks at the art. Of being a barber.
He did the same thing for me. I was, if you go back 2 years ago, I interviewed Andy Frisell on my podcast, and I put a clip out the other day. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was going bald, bro. And it was Peter that was like, hey, there's things you can do here. Right. It was the first guy that just started going, hey, here's some options. Here's some people to call, and I'm getting the surgery. And bro, I mean, it's night and day difference. I love how I look with my hairline and stuff. Now people hit me up all the time, and so, but it's same thing. It's like somebody that just actually takes their job to that next level. Where they're thinking about, no, how can I really make a difference here?
Yeah, and you can tell the difference, And so that's why I love speaking with people like Peter, because he took a route that he was really passionate about. And created his own brand, and he's flying everywhere. I think he's flying to England, he was saying, pretty soon.
Yeah, well, you got a good barber when he's getting flown to England to cut hair.
I know, right? So, shout out to Peter.
I love it, man. Well, dude, I wanted to have you on the podcast so bad. One of the things about America in general is we love a good comeback story, but America loves a couple things. They love to build someone up, then they want to tear you down, man. Yeah. They will work so hard to do that. But once they've torn you down, they want to build you back up to be the hero again. It's kind of cool because I think what the Netflix documentary did is brought you back where people went, oh, shit, this is a really good guy.
Yeah.
Like this guy got absolutely screwed at it. And now everybody knows what happened. Everybody knows what that is. But I think if we go back to that time, I know for myself, I'm going to tell a quick funny story, but I actually got catfished before you did. And so I knew the second, I remember I was at the gym, I was in Arizona when the story broke. I knew exactly what happened, bro. Immediately, I'm like, oh shit, that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
And mine, I kind of go into it a little bit. I throw this big July 4th party every year. We'll have, this year we had like 10,000 people there. But every year after that party on Facebook, I'd get 40, 50, 60 new requests for friends on Facebook, right? And I always look, I'm a single guy that, it's 2008 or 9. It was probably 2009, I think.
Yeah, Facebook just came out.
Yeah, it was summer of 2009.
Yep,
it was summer 2009. And this super cute girl, her name was something Cotton. Anyway, like Lindsay Cotton or something like that. And I'm like, man, this girl's beautiful. And so I add her, of course. And, a couple of weeks go by, nothing. And I just hit her up and we start chatting. And she's friends with 45 people that I'm close with.
Neutral,
like legit friends of mine, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, cool, And so I start blowing her up. I was just like, hey, man, what's up? Or hey, girl, what's up? And she's like, yeah, I went to your fireworks show. It was amazing. I was like, oh, sweet.
Yeah.
And I said, where do you live? She goes, well, I live in Pleasant Grove with my sister right now, but I'm from California. And the whole thing was just so good. She's like, yeah, and she had pictures from when she was cheerleader in Texas. She had pictures in California.
Yeah.
And my exact type too, dude. I was just like totally hook, line, sinker for this girl. So I started talking to her almost every day. And she would send me a picture almost every day. Like we wake up, and I remember I drove to a softball tournament. We talked for probably 3 hours. Oh, man, this girl's cool. She's dope as hell. This is all within a week. This is like this first week. But where I got lucky, or where I kind of figured it out, is she sent me a picture, and I think she screwed up. She didn't mean to send me the picture. She did. It was like her real picture.
Yeah.
It was like on a Sunday.
Yeah.
I was like, who the hell's this?
Yeah.
And then I kind of started going, wait a second, what's going on? And I've been around enough hot girls. They don't come on that strong. Not girls that look like this. She was like a 10, and she's just being way too excited. But dude, I was about to book a trip to go out to California and go see this girl. And so I'm like, hold on a second. So I just called my buddy. I'm like, dude, do you know any private investigators? I think I'm being like, somebody's fake. And what I thought though, because catfishing wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
So I remember thinking, I think she just doesn't look like this. Maybe she got in an accident. Maybe she's
Yeah, there was
overweight
no
now.
term for it.
No,
Yeah,
there
yeah.
wasn't. It wasn't like maybe it's not even her,
Yeah,
right?
right,
It was like
right.
maybe she's just really fat now. That's literally what I thought.
right,
And so I'm like, I kind of want to. Laura Cotton, that was her name. Anyway, long story short, dude, I hire this guy. He ends up pulling up, finds her phone number because I had her phone number. We were talking. Pulls her information. I get her info, and it's this girl from Reno, Nevada. And in seconds, I got her Facebook, and I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I felt, and I remember the feelings. I was just like, oh, I felt so violated. I felt, because I might have already booked the flight. Like, I
Yeah.
think I was going to a buddy's wedding, and I booked it a few days early to go hang out with her. So I was duped. I was like, shit. And I remember just how that felt. And so when the story broke with you, I just was like, my heart immediately, I'm like, damn, you just feel betrayed. I was like, damn, this dude, and you're just in the spotlight. You happen to be one of the 2 or 3 best college football players in the nation that year.
Yeah.
Your grandma actually dies. So you just keep getting put in the news. Your team's #1. You're going, ranked in the top 2, 3. You're undefeated. And so just kept putting the spotlight. I can only imagine it, dude. And so ever since that day, I'm like, man, I want to talk to Manti about this because I just get it, dude.
Yeah, I think it's so complex. Every situation is different. And it was funny because when I was in the NFL, a lot of my teammates will ask about it, and as I started,
I'd never heard of it till it happened to me.
Right, and so me kind of being one of the first big cases of it, it definitely was a path that there was nobody that I could go to and say, hey, how do I get through this? How do I kind of deal with the emotions of it? How do I deal with kind of the pressures, the expectations, while still trying to deal with the other expectations of I'm training to go to the NFL Combine, and this is what I've been working for my whole life. But internally, it was just a war. And I think that's kind of where my story has become. It's a story of somebody who's not only dealt with a lot of adversity in his own way, but has tried to do it with the most grace, not only with the world, but more so with himself, and trying to turn a very bad situation and stay true to who he is. But yeah, that time was something that kind of put me where I am today.
Well, and the part of your story I love the most is you have a beautiful wife now, 2 beautiful kids.
Yeah.
You're just crushing life. Like anybody would trade places with life. And that's the beautiful part of your story. That's why, like, sitting here, I'm so, like, it's so valuable because you, like, if this had to happen to somebody, the amount of emotions you had to experience, like, thank God they picked somebody that could handle all that. Because, dude, you dealt with a real death of a girlfriend. Whether it was real or not, it was real to you. You had to handle those emotions. You had to handle the spotlight being on all that. The day that you got the call that she wasn't dead, you had to handle that. Like, what the hell? Like, no one, there's no playbook for that. There's no way to handle that. You're a kid. I had a chance kid in a long time. And I'm like, dude, they don't know shit about shit. Like, they don't know how to handle anything.
What you don't know.
Dude, they were just... And it just hit me. I'm like, oh, we think of them as this mature older person because we see them on TV every day. We see them on Twitter every day. Same with you. Like, people feel like they know you. They feel like you're this old, responsible person. You're the captain of the football team, But you're a child at that time, bro.
Yeah, we're all human, bro. And then I think that's what's great about where we're at right now in society. I think people are starting to see that a little bit with the access that people are getting to these athletes. There was a clip yesterday or the day before that I saw of Patrick Mahomes. Class act, dude, right? I'm a big fan of Patrick. But I guess he was at this golf tournament, and he was getting in trouble for signing autographs. And I don't golf, but I guess they're all like on a timer. Like, he's like, hey, listen, you can't just chill around this. There's another group coming. They have to tee off and all of that stuff. So he got a little scolding from the event.
Yeah, pace of play. You got to keep it moving.
Right. And so they say, hey, you can't sign any more autographs. So I guess they're at this one hole, and he's about to tee off again, and you hear this kid, hey, Patrick, can I get an autograph? And Patrick responds, he's like, sorry, buddy, they told me that I couldn't. And I guess the kid's dad was like, well, you could at least do it for one. He's like, at least the 1 out of 100, you could at least do it for one. You'll make one person happy. And Patrick turns around. He's like, well, then I'll make 99 sad. And so it's just like thinking of it like people look at these athletes, right? And they're like, man, you have to be this, this, and this. So there's all of these expectations on these athletes. And at the end of the day, they're just duke it out, and just kind of figure out your way from there.
Well, and I actually thought you handled it pretty well. Some people said he should have been more vocal about what was really happening and what happened. But here's the thing. You tried. You went on, I think you went on Katie Couric or one of the interviews shortly thereafter. But people in that position, here's what people don't understand if this hasn't ever happened. It's happened to me. You try to explain yourself and people don't want the truth. They're not fighting in good faith. They're not debating with an honest heart. And so they don't care. It doesn't matter what you say. They're just coming at you. And so I can only imagine it, dude. And you're trying to get ready. Well, at that time it hadn't come out, but you were dealing with it already when you're dealing with the Heisman stuff, and then you're dealing with the national championship game.
Yeah, so that was all. Yeah, so all of
that was all before it came out.
Yeah.
But you had already known at that point then that you had to deal with some. It was like the story was in the middle of it, right? Like, wasn't it kind of happening at the time?
So it happened. So I got the call explaining how what had gone down by the person who catfished me. A week after the national championship day.
Oh, it was after. Okay.
Yeah. And so
So you were dealing with the draft, though.
Yeah. So I was dealing with the training and all of that stuff. So I remember, and the documentary kind of goes over it, but not really. They kind of just rushed through it. But I was in Bradenton, Florida. I was at the IMG Academy, and just a normal day of training, right? And we're getting ready for our second workout. And I'm in a training room, and I'm watching ESPN or whatever is on the TV, and I get a phone call from my agent. He's like, "Where you at?" I was like, "I'm at the training room. I'm getting ready for the second workout." He's like, "Well, I need you to go back to your apartment and just lock yourself in there. Don't answer no phone calls. Don't turn on the TV. Don't do anything." And I'm like, what's going on?
Yeah.
But we had these golf carts because the campus was so big, so I jumped in my golf cart. I went to my apartment, and the apartment that we stayed in was right outside of the campus, the IMG campus that we were training at. And so I got there, and my agent said, "Don't go on no Twitter." I had Twitter at that time. He said, "Don't go on, don't turn on the TV, nothing." And I was like, I think I was 22, 21.
You got to see what's going on.
So why would I not do that? So I go on my Twitter at that time, and then that's when I saw the feed. And that's when I saw everything racking up. And so there's this narrative that I knew before. I found out.
That's fascinating because that is the narrative. Like in my mind, that's what I remembered. But that's really interesting.
So I found out it was a whole catfishing scheme. Like obviously there are things that were happening, right? But when I found out truly what happened was when the whole world found out. So I found out literally as the
So up till that moment, you still thought it was a girl that you'd been talking to and everything.
Well, I didn't know. I didn't know what it was.
You just knew that it was.
Yeah, I just like, I don't know what it is. You know what I mean? My uncle told me like a month before, I think you're getting catfished. I don't know what that is, but I got a national championship to play in a few weeks. Like let's roll.
Yeah, okay. So that's the part of the story I remember. Like you had to deal with like some shit's going on. I don't know what it is. This girl that I thought was dead is not dead. But
so it was like December-ish around there. And I was in Florida at the ESPN Awards. And it was the night after the award show, and I just had won like the Walter Camp, the Maxwell, the
runner-up of the Heisman, which for a defensive player does not happen.
It was the night before I flew to New York for the Heisman. So I was in
you won all those awards.
Yeah, I was in this little award like circuit, and I just had won all of these awards in Florida, and I was in my room. We're getting ready to go to sleep so that I could board my flight to go to New York for the Heisman. And that's when I get a call from this girl saying that she was now alive. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. This,
dude,
like, no, this, I don't know what's going on, like, but this is some joke, right?
Yeah. Did you think it was her? Did you think it was somebody pretending to be her?
So at that time, I was already in another relationship, right? And so, it was kind of like, hey, listen, like, I would check in with the family from time to time and just say how they're doing. Say, hey, how you guys are doing? How are you guys doing right at this point? But it was nothing real serious. But this was the first time that I heard from them in a while.
Got it.
And it just so happened, and again, if anybody doesn't understand it, go watch the documentary because it'll give you more context. This is just 2 weeks after, like a week or 2 weeks after we just played USC. And if you don't understand what happened at SC game where I met the niece, and the niece brought over the teddy bear and saying, hey, this was Auntie Lala's and stuff. So there's this whole little story, right? So my my story wasn't just like a catfishing thing. It was like a whole.
Well, that's what makes yours so bad is there was so many parts to it too.
There's so
Cancer
many layers
and
to it, right?
Death and all these other
so many
parts.
people
It's
were
just like, oh my
they
gosh.
had so many different past experiences with people that I knew. Like how you said, like you had 40 plus mutual. Well, I had people that was like, oh no, that person is. I know that person. I'm like, are you sure? Like,
Dude,
I know that.
I saw one of the guys that was hitting her up a lot on her posts.
Yeah.
His name was David Romero, and he was a good friend of mine. I'd sold him a couple of houses. I saw him at the 7-Eleven. This is how, because people don't understand, like, it made so much sense. And I said, bro, it was after I'd figured out she was catfishing me. I said, hey, this girl's not real. This is who she really is.
Situation.
Yeah, I said this to him. I'm like, hey, this girl's not real. This is who it really is. And he looked at me dead in the eyes. He goes, nah, I've been talking to her for over a year, bro.
Yeah.
He's like, no, he was pissed at me. He's like, no, you're wrong. He's just, and he walked off.
Yeah,
He was just
yeah.
like, you're not accurate. And I'm like, wait, what, did he not just hear a word of what I just said?
Yeah.
But it was such a foreign thing. Like, it just made, what I was saying made zero sense.
Right.
It's like, what the hell?
And for perspective, like you can see where he's coming from. You know, just like what is that? You know what I mean? Like, what are you talking about? You know, so now that we're in 2023, I was so grateful that the directors were able to take people back to that time, kind of like what the world was like then, what social media was like then. You know, Facebook just came out and all of this stuff. So, yeah, it definitely was a crazy chapter, bro. With a lot of lessons.
Well, and I appreciate you kind of recapping. And it's interesting how we even remember history, right? Like in my mind, I'm like, I even have the story mixed up, and I even researched coming into the podcast to make sure I wouldn't get it mixed up.
That's the crazy. I love that point. Just right there is, how do we learn history? We learn it through somebody else's story.
Right.
So the problem is nowadays there's so many people's stories about one singular event, right? And some people ask me, it's like, hey, what is something that you would say about sharing false news? I say, well, I always try to live by something where if I'm trying to learn something, if I want to know something about something, or if I heard somebody say something about me, I am not going to go to somebody else and ask them about that person. I'm going to go straight to that person and say, hey, bro, tell me what's up. You know what I mean? I heard you said this, or whatever it may be, right? Go to the source. Don't go to the outside sources.
I have a term for it. I call it chasing it up the ladder. So if somebody comes and brings me like a rumor, I say, okay, well, where'd you hear that from? Because I don't think that's true. And then if they don't tell me, I said, then I'm going to assume you made it up.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to tell me who said it, then me and you now have a changed relationship. And then they go, well, I heard it from this person. Great. Let's go to them next. Let's figure out where this came from.
Right.
Because we're going to chase it down.
Where's the source at?
Yeah.
Right. And so I think there's so many different layers to it where there's that side, right? But then also we also live in a time where everybody got an opinion. The hard part is sometimes people take those opinions and make them factual. Say, no, that's just an opinion. There's opinion and then there's fact. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. Not everybody's entitled to their own facts. I mean, the facts are what they are, right? So I think in today's society, it's all about figuring out, okay, where's the source? Let's go to the source. Let's not worry about opinion. Let's see what the facts are about whatever situation it may be.
Well, I think what was difficult in your case, you had so many people that had credibility.
Yeah.
That were spouting their opinion as fact. Like you got that as bad as anybody ever has. Yeah. And so I don't know if that tainted or changed your view forever of the media itself.
Yeah.
Because you really, I mean, people, even on your interview, I remember, when you went on Katie Couric and she asked questions that were more accusatory.
Yeah.
And it made you seem guilty. I remember as I'm watching, I'm like, this is bullshit. I'm like, I know what happened. I'm
so that's kind of answering your question for people that was like, why didn't he speak up? Well, there are a lot of people that came and wanted to share the story, but it wasn't the story.
It didn't fit their narrative.
They wanted to share their way, right? I remember back then, like there were so many companies that reached out saying, hey, we'll pay you this amount, this amount, this amount, this amount. I'm like, I don't care about the money. Like I care about the story. And so people have asked, a lot of the questions have been, hey, why did you wait so long? Why did it take 10 years until this Netflix documentary came out? I was like, well, it's twofold. One, there's nobody at that time that was willing to share the story. But more importantly than that, and I say this, more importantly, I wasn't in the place where I could be transparent, where I could be vulnerable and tell you, okay, this is everything that happened, right? Because like you said, it's embarrassing to be catfished that way.
Oh, I was embarrassed. I felt violated.
So how am I supposed to go on any type of source and say, hey, listen, this is the whole story, but I'm still ashamed of parts. In order for you to tell the whole truth, you need to tell the whole truth, even the parts that you're not proud of. And because I wasn't at that point yet, there's no way that I was going to tell it. Not only was I not going to tell it, there was no credible source that was willing to say, hey, I'll be your warrior. I'll be your captain. I'll be that guy that goes out there for you and tells your story for you. Everybody was like, hey, listen, I'll tell it, but I'll spin it the way that I want to. You know, right? So it just wasn't the right time.
Well, what I love about what you're doing now, I mean, we've talked a lot about coaching and kind of how we use our pain to give us purpose, right? It's what I do with my coaching program. Is really my entire program is based on the lessons I learned the hard way. And I think there are some similarities in different ways. One of the things, we both grew up very religious, you know, in the LDS culture. And one of the things that's really hard, and I don't think people understood this about your story, is it's not really okay not to be okay sometimes. So as this is happening to you, I'm imagining, I know with me, I went through all my hardest things by myself. Anytime I had any kind of shame or guilt around sexual things, I couldn't just go to my family. I couldn't just tell people about it. Like, you're ashamed of it. And there's not really a good outlet for it. At least I didn't feel like I had one. And I don't know, like maybe with you, maybe that's why people are like, well, why didn't he just talk to more people about it? It's like, you don't, it's weird. It's like, you're already in this single place in a church that's all about family and closeness, and even the polyculture even more. So I don't know how much that played into kind of like you not knowing what to do besides just being a kid, but I empathize with all of it. But the cool part about that is you now get to transform and take all that. Because you went through a lot of emotions, bro. You had to deal with some stuff that, and what a gift. Nobody gets to do that. Nobody gets to go through that many emotions. Like from the football game, it was either Michigan or Michigan State, where the whole stadium's wearing the Lays.
Michigan.
Then you're playing in the national title game. You're beating these teams. You're doing all this stuff. To be that high, then to have this craziness going, the lows. Like, you went through an emotional roller coaster that nobody in their life gets to go through, and because of that, you now get to transform. And whatever people are going through, you're going to be able to empathize with them in a way that no one else.
Well, that's the beauty of it, and I've said it before, is I know the whole spectrum, right? I've been at the top, like the top, and I've also have fallen kind of fast all the way to the bottom, like the depths, right? Where they talk about, you know, what does rock bottom feel like? Well, I can tell you what it feels like. I can tell you what it smells like. I can tell you what it looks like, what it feels like, the sensations down there, how it seems like it's kind of like this room, right? But the lights are off, but you're suffocating in it. Like, I can tell you those type of emotions. But then the crazy thing about rock bottom is it's a lot like this room. There's not a lot of noise down there, but it's loud. Because the only noise is the noises that are playing in your head. And so that's what's so beautiful about down there. It's forming, right? Like, you're just being formed down there. And you really have only two decisions down there. Do I just sit here in this silent but loud room, deafening room? Or do I make decisions in my life every single day, steps in my life that can get me out of here one day? And it's not like people say it's a crawl out of there, right? It's like, no, it's not a crawl, bro. It's almost like imagine this room was pitch black and we couldn't see where the door was. You keep just knocking on walls, and you just keep knocking and knocking and knocking, and there's going to come that time where you're like, man, am I knocking and nobody's listening? There's somebody on the other side of this wall. And then as long as you keep knocking, eventually you'll find the door. And matter of fact, the door will fall. And light will just come through. We're like, okay, I know where I got to go now. And you continue to make that path. So I know how it feels to be at the top. I know how it feels to be at the bottom. And then I know how it feels to build yourself all the way back up. And because of that, there's this spectrum that I have, that I can meet people wherever you are. And I think that's such a gift. Some people like to talk to other individuals and say, oh, I'm here and you're there. I can only speak to you from the experiences that I have here. That's not my case. I know exactly where you are, whether you're on your way up or whether you're on the way down. I know exactly where you are, so I can help you. I can help you avoid the drop. But if you're on that drop, I can tell you, don't worry. It's gonna be okay. You're falling down this cliff and you're just scraping and you're grabbing whatever you can and all the branches are breaking. Your nails are bleeding because you're scraping it on rocks, right? But eventually you're gonna hit that rock bottom. And it's a beautiful thing because one, the only way is up. Two, it's the person that walks out that door when it falls down is gonna be one bad dude. And that's how I am now. You know what I mean, bro?
No, I love how you talked about the spectrum. I've said this a little bit different way, but in business, you know, people, or with money, I guess you could say financially, right? People will be like, well, if I had money, I would do this. But it's like, you don't know how you'd be unless you had that money. Right. And I mean, like, I've lived off $75 a month for 2 years in Mexico, and I had more money than everyone I knew my age for a long time. Right. Like I had a lot of success early in business and real estate and some of these things. Then I got to ride the Nikola roller coaster, where in my bank account I had over $30 million in there for about 4 months. And I watched that thing tank overnight, right? And it's still a smaller spectrum, but it helps me to be able to understand like all these different viewpoints in these places with people financially. I think my advice is much stronger because of that spectrum. And you literally, I mean, you were the most famous athlete in the country for about a 6-month period before all this happened. I mean, that fall, Notre Dame was back. You had resurrected it. You were I mean, it was every day. I mean, being Mormon, right? And you almost went to BYU, or maybe you didn't. Well, maybe I don't know how that goes. We'll talk about that. But like, we followed you. And it was, how's the best way to put this? As a BYU fan, it was cool because you were doing so good. But it's like, damn, man, like, why couldn't he be at BYU? It was Notre Dame. They're Mormon. Like, that was, you know, but you're following you. And it was every single day, dude. You were the main story. You know what I mean, people want to know about Notre Dame. It's the Yankees, it's the Lakers, it's Notre Dame. Like, people want to know. And so you really were at the peak of what a man can experience. And then you fell from grace, like you said, about as fast as a human can fall from grace. And it wasn't even for anything that like you really did bad, which is the craziest part of your story still. But so when you got to that rock bottom, I mean, you're tag on top of that, you're trying to make it in the NFL. And talent-wise, you're there. Like, you got all the talent in the world. Maybe take us back. Part of your story I've never heard. Maybe, I think it skipped over it way too fast in the documentary, in my opinion. I'd love to get back and hear how difficult was it, or what was going on with you as you tried to get into the NFL, like starting from even before the draft, because did it affect your status? And then what was it like just going through this turmoil while you're trying to start a career in the NFL?
Well, it's so complex, right? Because internally, I'm done. You know, like I'm fighting. I told people I wasn't concerned about the game of football because the guys that I was going against internally was way scarier than the ones that I was going against on Sundays. Way scarier. Because the guy that was internally was me. Like, that was who I was battling. And, you know, if you're battling yourself, there's no way, it is impossible for you to be successful in anything you're doing, let alone being in the pros. Like, you're amongst the best of the best, like playing Peyton Manning, playing Drew Brees, right? Playing all of these guys that you looked up and you're like, oh my, you grew up idolizing, like, oh my gosh, like that's Peyton. I remember when I first played Peyton Manning, it was in San Diego, and I remember just thinking like, oh my gosh, Peyton Manning was my mom's favorite player. Okay. And I was thinking like, man, that was one of my first moments of, man, I'm in the NFL, right? But I said in the documentary, that was the first time that I experienced what people now know as you're having an anxiety attack. It was my first preseason game. We're playing the Seattle Seahawks, and I have all my little rituals that I do. And so I'm kind of going through my rituals, and I'm standing on a sideline getting ready for the national anthem. And the national anthem is always it's such a big part of the game for me because of this moment. And I remember I'm standing there, and I got my hand over my chest, and I remember my feet just start to go numb. And I'm like, oh, what is this? And that numb sensation starts to travel up my legs all the way up to, like, I remember my fingers start to get tingly, and I start to get lightheaded a little bit, and everything starts to go bright. and like these little black dots start popping up everywhere, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? And I was like, oh, what's going on? And now I got to go play a football game. And every single play, I remember it even started before, like during practice, there was this loud voice in my head that was just like, don't mess up, Manti. Mm-hmm. Are you sure? Like, are you sure that's right? Are you positive? When before that, bro,
you just play free.
There was no voice. Mm-hmm. There were no doubts. There were no, are you sure? It was, I am who I am. Mm-hmm. I do what I do. And if you don't know what I do, I'm about to remind you what I do. Now, that was what my career was like for the first 3 years. Again, and so I'm in this hole, just knocking on walls, right? Just like, man, what is going on? Like, how do I figure this out? And that's when going into my contract year, I went to go see a therapist. And this was actually the second therapist that I saw. I saw a therapist like after my second year.
So I was going to say, this is your third year in the NFL?
This is end of my third year, going into my fourth year. So okay. I was on my contract year, and my DC pulled me on the side and he said, hey, I had worked my way up to be captain. I was captain for the last part of my third year, and looked to as a leader on the defense, despite like everything, right? I wasn't really playing good ball. Like I was out there were little spurts here and there, but it wasn't consistent. And that's the difference between the good and the greats. Is the goods can be good one night. The greats, they're great all the time. And so I was able to kind of be seen and recognized as a captain. And going into my last year, I was voted as a captain. And so I knew, like, man, I got to figure this out, right? There's a level of urgency there. And so I went to go see this therapist, and he's a Notre Dame alum. And in our first meeting, he kind of knew the story, and we're kind of talking. And based on my past experience with the other therapists I was like, man, I don't know, this is not going to work. Like, you asking me the same questions, right? And it was the end of our session, and he asked me, he was like, let me ask you a question. Have you forgiven the person? I said, yeah, I've forgiven him. He said, how do you know you forgave him? I was like, and I told him a story. I was like, well, this past off season, I went to a high school All-American game in Oceanside. And I remember I was standing in the end zone at this high school All-American game. And I'm standing in the end zone, and like literally on a 30-yard line, so about 40 yards. So I'm standing behind the end zone. So about 40 yards from me, I see this girl. And she's standing behind this older gentleman, looked like her dad, and the gentleman's in a wheelchair. But I recognize the girl. I was like, oh, that girl looks familiar, but I know that I've never met her before. And my best friend over there, my best friend Timmy, comes over, and he's all happy. He was like, Oos. He said, what's up? What's the look for? And I'm like, oh, I'm good, bro. I'm good. He said, but what's the look for? I was like, oh, I'm good. That girl over there, and I pointed to the girl, and I was like, she looks so familiar. I was like, but I know I've never met her before. And then remember, he grabbed me, and you think he's bigger than me,
yeah.
bro. He grabs me I remember he grabs me around my shoulder. He's like, Oos. He's like, we can leave right now if you want to. You let me know. And I'm looking at this dude like, bro, what's your issue?
Yeah.
I said, why we got to leave for? He's like, that's Renaya's sister. And I was like, that's where I recognize you from. It was from pictures. I was like, oh, okay. So where's Renaya at? And he's like, I heard he's on the other side of the bleachers. There's like this long bleachers. He's like, he's on the other side of the bleachers taking pictures over there. I was like, oh, okay. And he looked at me. He was like, Oos. He said, what you want to do? And at that time, bro, I looked at him. I was like, I'm good. I'm fine. Let's enjoy the game. And at that time, I knew that I had forgiven for what had happened to me.
Sure.
So I tell the therapist that story. He's like, okay. He's like, I'm happy for you. I said, well, let me ask you a second question. Have you forgiven yourself? Yeah. And that was a term I never ever thought about in my life. to look at myself as a person, to look at myself as somebody who needed forgiveness, who needed love, who needed compassion, who needed somebody to tell him that it's okay. And it was that process, bro, of forgiving that little boy inside of me, because we all have that little boy, that little girl that's in there, that's just innocent, that just wants to play, that looks at this life through a glass of roses, right? And sometimes this world teaches that little boy or that little girl that they're wrong, that you shouldn't look at it that way. Well, I had to tell that little boy to say, hey, it's not your fault. It's okay, bro. Like, we're going to be all right. It wasn't your fault. Like, keep being you. And that is what kind of became my story that people got to see since the documentary. Was people say, oh, it's like a redemption story. I was like, for me, it's not a redemption story. It's a reminder, because I remained the same guy that I was before, that you cheered on and that you had the liaison for. I was the same dude, but some other people told you, that's not him. He's actually this. He's manipulating you. He's lying to you. Blah, blah, and you believe that, or at least the majority did.
That's such a fascinating part of your story, bro. It's like you never did change.
Yeah.
Like you were the same guy.
Yep.
It's not like you had needed to and I kind of said this a little bit at the beginning, but it's not like you needed to redeem yourself or change yourself. It was just the perception of that guy.
Yep. And I think it's. I think maybe it was your podcast or one podcast I was listening to that it was so profound. And again, until you've been through those dark places and until you've been through those situations, you will never understand how heavy people's references are, people's stories are that you can relate to. And this story was, they told the story of the hero and the villain. I don't know if you heard this before. And somebody was saying, it was on, I remember it was like this doctor. He was like, the difference between the hero and the villain is they both have the same upbringing, the hero and the villain. There's some sort of tragedy that happens in their life, both the hero and the villain, right? All the heroes you look at, Batman, Super, whatever, they lost a parent, whatever it is, right? There's a huge tragedy that happens in their life. With villains, there's like a mark on them, like the Joker had those cuts, right? There's abuse, whatever it may be, right? The difference is the villain says, the world hurt me, so I'm going to hurt it back. The hero says, the world hurt me, but I'm still going to love. And that was the decision that I made. Now, I didn't make it all the time because it's hard to make those decisions down there when you're in rock bottom in that hole by yourself, right? There's sometimes like, man, what am I doing? But every single time that crossroad came, where I say, man, Ty, you can either let this thing devour you and hate everybody and see this world through very dark eyes, or you can choose to rise above it and still choose to love. I constantly chose to do that. I chose to love. And it's no credit to me because, like how you said, we're very faith-based, spiritual people. And we had the greatest example of what true love meant and what true love looks like with Jesus Christ. For the greatest being to ever come to this earth, the most perfect being, to go through things 1,000,000 times worse than what you and I will ever go through. And yet, as he's hanging up on that cross, he says, forgive them for they know not what they do. So even as he's going through excruciating pain after having the crown of thorns, being whipped, all of that stuff, being betrayed by one of his friends, he still chose to love, bro. That, if anything, is what I try to do in my own way, right? Is to live my life as close to how the Savior lived his life. And if my life could be an example for anybody else to say, hey, Manti did this, so I'm going to try to do this. Don't give me the credit, give him the credit, because I got it from him. And I think that thing stayed in the nicest hotels, been on private jets, been around some of the most wealthiest people, like you can even imagine. Like, I've seen money. But the thing that I crave on a consistent basis, on a daily basis, is peace. That is what I crave. And I can only get that one place. And it comes from him. Because he's the only one that I know that understands how it feels to sit in that room. Because he had to do it alone. And when you start to understand the atonement with that much intimacy, that you start to realize, like, damn, Jesus was a bad dude, bro. Because it was almost nearly, I felt like it was impossible for me to go through what I went through. Imagine what the greatest of all went to go through. And he did it with such grace. So why can't I do that?
Well, you're, I think the biggest example all of us have is Jesus by far. But the hardest part of Jesus' story is it's so far from current day.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why your story is so powerful, is because, I mean, you got wronged, dude, by everybody in the story, right? Like, there was a lot of misjustice there. And, you know, one of the things that we didn't even talk about is, I think one of the worst things we see sometimes is the strong person is like, well, yeah, if they understood me, though, I mean, they got everything going on, like, you physically and, you know, and just everything that you had, all the resources that you had, all of the help that you had around you, all the, I mean, the team that you had behind you, all of that, and you were still vulnerable. You still were susceptible to this thing. And I think that's why even your physical appearance is so powerful when talking about this, because you went through it. You had to go down to the depths of hell, dude. And so talk a little bit about kind of what you're doing. I know you're getting into coaching. We've had some discussions about this. I love it. You know, one of the things I try to do in my program is, if I can't relate to something, I bring in someone that can. It's one of the things that the guys I'll say I do the best is I don't try to pretend, you know, because I'd be ratted out. Like, it wouldn't have any meaning to it. But even with this podcast, like when I launched this 6-7 years ago, I dreamed to be able to have podcasts that will change people's lives. And I know there's people listening to this right now that'll change their life, and they'll just be able to understand. Because how many times have we felt like we were done dirty, or we were tricked, or we were fooled in life? I mean, you feel dumb. It's like you said, you have to forgive yourself. You don't even know you're supposed to, but you just feel bad. You just feel stupid. And so many people will be able to relate to that. But I kind of want to hear kind of how you're using your coaching now and your platform, because that's kind of part of the cool part of your next part of your story is you get to now use this platform to do whatever you want.
It's funny, like how you mentioned, you and I asked to meet with you, and thank you for doing that, bro. Because I've been doing a lot of public speaking ever since the documentary came out, and I've you know, it's not like public speaking comes easy, but I also understand that I have a gift that I'm able to be relatable. And I think that's a gift, because not a lot of people can relate. And I think in this day and age, the more that we can relate to people, the more that we can give them power, because I can see you. I see you where you are. And for people to feel like they're seen or feel seen in this day and age is huge. So I've been doing a lot of public speaking, but my agent, everybody since everything has happened has been wanting me to get on TV somehow, right? They've been pushing like the broadcast. You can go broadcast, like. So I've met with a lot of different networks and been trying to do that. People have been pushing me to do different things, but with the public speaking, it has been such a cool experience, because I never would have thought that, based on my story and me sharing that story, how many lives I could change. And it's the conversations that I would have with individuals after I speak about what they've been going through or how they came to this conference not knowing what to expect. But when they heard my story, it just touched them. And they're like, man, like you helped me to go through what I've been going through and give me a perspective that can help me go through it and overcome it. And I'm like, man, that's what it's all about. I love that feeling. And so I told my agent, I was like, hey, yeah, guys, I know we've been trying to do the broadcasting thing, but you know, I really love helping people. I really love being able to connect with people and say, okay, hey, where are you? Okay, I know where you're at. Where do you want to go? Okay, you want to go here? I can help take you there. And I think that is all of our callings for those who've been called. And when I say that, I mean those who go through some crap in their life, I feel are the ones who are called. Because it is those that God trusted to say, hey, you can deal with this. I trust you to deal with it. And the version of ourselves that we become on the tail end of it, that's the weapon that he needs. That's the tool that he needs to go reach everybody else. Because when I die, when we all die, bro, right, we're going to go, I believe that we're going to meet our maker. And
for sure,
he's not going to ask, Matt, how much money you make, how many tackles, how many sacks, how many interceptions, right? How many trophies did you win? He's going, how many lives did you save? That's the only question he's going to ask. How many lives did you save, Manti? And the experiences that I've been getting since speaking, that's been kind of the thing that I've been trying to navigate. Like, okay, how can I, what things can I do, whether it be coaching, whether it be holding seminars, whether it be continuing to do the podcast, continuing like working on a book. What things can I do where I can do the most good?
That's beautiful, man. Well, you know, it's I had that recollection. It was about 4 years ago. It's how I ended up in coaching. Is I was at the peak of my career. I just sold the most expensive home ever in Utah. I was the #1 agent that year, and I just had this feeling. Wait, like if you died, or there was actually a real estate agent that got killed, and the whole news, every story was like realtor this, realtor that, realtor killed, and I was like, if I died tomorrow and that's my whole story, like I love being a realtor. It was an awesome career, but I'm like, damn, like. I'd feel bad because I want so much more of my life is, you know? And that was the day I asked that question. If you're listening to this, it's a question you asked yourself is, where can I do the most good? Like, how can I create the most value? How can I leave the biggest mark on this planet and change the frequency of the entire thing and raise everybody together? And it led me to where I'm doing this stuff now, you know? And it's cool because when you really commit to it, when you commit to that cause, why I have no doubt you'll end up at the top of this game in every single way, because when you truly commit to it, like things just start happening. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like they just do. Like people come into your life. Like it was funny when I first met you at Peter's at getting my haircut, and I just didn't want to force anything. And Peter's like, dude, you didn't really ask him if you could be on your podcast or if you could do anything. I was like, bro, we're not going anywhere. That's going to happen. The universe just works for me, bro. I don't know what to tell you. And he's he's like, you're right, huh? I was like, yeah. I was like, when it's supposed to happen, it'll happen. If we did this a year ago, you still weren't sure what you were doing. It would have been just all about the documentary. Like this is, and so I just kind of trust that. And you know, when you've made that commitment, things will just work. They just do, man. And because it's like you said, you know, a tree can only grow as deep as the roots go. And you got some deep roots, thanks, man. Bro. So it'll be fun to see what comes up from here. And,
well, I always say, you know, one of the beautiful things is I always say, you know, you can tell the impact that people have left, that a person has left on the world by how big their funeral is. And some of the richest people don't have a lot of people. You know, and that, like if that's how you're going to measure it, right? For me, I want to affect and impact as many people as I can so that when I pass on, the stories that people tell my children of their father, it's like, listen, bro. Like when they talk to my son, listen, your dad was this. Your dad was this for me. He was a blessing for me. When they talk to my daughter or when they see my daughter walking around, whether she's doing something, hopefully she's doing something smart. If she's not, they pull her and say, hey, listen, Hiro, your daddy was this type of man. You know what I mean? And that is what I want my legacy to be, is somebody that made an impact on people, that made people feel great, that made people feel seen. And yeah, bro, whatever comes next is going to be that. And it's going to be great.
I love it, man.
Yeah.
No, I love that example too. I was at lunch today and there was a kid that I grew up with. I haven't seen him in 20 years. And he's like, hey man. And I looked at him, I was like, and I kind of felt dumb. I'm like, hey man, remind me. And he's like, oh shoot, dude. I was like, I think I was 8 last time I saw you. I told him a story about something his dad did that changed my life at lunch today.
Yeah.
And he's like, wow. He's like, that's cool, man. And he just the way his dad reacted about something that I'd done that wasn't so good. And anyway, I was 8 or 9. I was like this just little kid, but you know, just kind of bring that up. But dude, well, thank you so much, man. People that want to get in touch with you, they want to, you know, follow your journey. By the way, you guys got to go see his cute little family, dude.
Yeah.
It's they're so cute. I was looking at all your videos and photos.
Yeah.
Your little girl, dude, she's something. But where do people go to follow you and get in touch?
So I only have Instagram, but on my Instagram, I have, if anybody wants to reach out, I have my agent, my contact email through my agency on there. But if you see me, the best thing you can do, if you see me around town, like here in Utah, come say hello. I love it.
Yeah.
I love when people come say hello. I love when people have those conversations with me. A lot of things have come up because of those little conversations that I've had with people, or somebody has seen me and say, hey, I know a buddy who wants to do this, whatever. Again, if it fits that criteria of doing some really, really good work, you can count on me that I'll be there.
I love it. Hey, I do have to ask one more question. All right, you were getting recruited. You grew up a USC fan.
Yes.
You living in Hawaii. Obviously, there was a big pull to BYU, and I remember, fingers crossed, that you're going to come to BYU. My audience, a lot of them, you know, BYU fans, Utah fans, people in Utah. How close were you to coming to BYU? Was that ever on the table, or was it? How did you decide? Just maybe take us. We'll end it with that, but I want to hear this story.
So this is a great story.
Have you been public with this before, by the way? I don't think I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Of it.
So I've been only a few times though.
Okay.
Maybe a couple times. With BYU, I had 2 cousins at BYU at that time, so definitely BYU was in my radar. Because 2 of my cousins went there, and obviously it's a church school, and me being a member of the church is one of those things that it's BYU, right? Utah, matter of fact, Utah, out of all the coaching staffs, had my favorite coaches. Coach Whittingham and now Coach Kalani Sitake at BYU. So quick story about Coach Kalani. So I was in 7th grade going to 8th grade. I was at the All Poly camp out there in Bountiful, Utah. My uncle runs that camp, and it was one of the beginning years of the camp. It was a full contact camp at that time.
Oh, wow.
And I was a little 7th going to 8th grader. 8th grader at that time, I just called myself 8th grader. And because I was bigger for my age, they stuck me with the varsity. And bro, I was getting pummeled. And I still remember to this day, there was a fullback from Alaska, big Samoan guy, hair coming out of the back of his helmet. They ran a lead right at me. And dude, when this dude hit me, bro, I felt like my nose was behind my head. Like, I remember my helmet came and hit me in the nose, and I was bleeding. I was tearing and I was crying, and I don't know if I was crying because I was embarrassed or because it was sore or whatever. Everything was just it was a huge just confusion of emotions. I remember coming to the side, and Kalani was the linebacker coach at U of U at that time. And I remember he put his arm around me, and he said, Oos, one day all of these coaches here are going to want you. So I just pray that when that day comes, you remember me. And that was when I was a nobody, bro. I was a little kid just getting pummeled, right? 2 years later, my career starts to take off. Fast forward to my junior year, I was the #1 ranked linebacker in the country. I was top 5, top 10 overall, right? But I always remember Coach Kalani, because he is the one that gave me that hope, that belief. Okay, now recruiting. So I grew up a huge USC fan. This is when Reggie Bush was at the USC. Like, it was just magic, right?
Greatest team to ever watch.
Yes, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
You know, so like you got Reggie, you got Lendell White, you got Dwayne Jarrett, you have all of these guys, right? You had Taylor Mays, you had Raymond Lugo, you had Brian Cushing, you had all of these. Like, I can go on and on. Anyway, I go on my Notre Dame trip around after Thanksgiving, my junior year. It was my senior. Yeah, senior. And it was the coldest recorded game in history. I left the game at halftime because it was so cold. And to top that all off, they lost that game at Notre Dame to Syracuse, who in 2008, they were the worst team in college football. Yeah. They lost the game. The whole stadium throws snowballs at the team. And I'm like, I'm not coming here.
By the way, I've been to the coldest game, one of the coldest games in Notre Dame. It was when they played BYU. It was, I think it was after that, but I think it was the coldest game since 1988. So it was even
What year
colder.
was that?
It was Kyle's senior year. So what was that?
2012?
11 or 12, yeah.
So that was my year. That was my senior year.
Did you guys beat BYU?
Yeah,
Barely. Okay. Yeah. So that was the game.
Barely. Yeah,
Coldest game ever. Like,
oh, that was warm, bro.
Oh my gosh, dude! I remember BYU was marching at halftime to go score.
Yeah.
And I didn't even care to go watch it. I was in the bathroom as the only heater, dude. I was just sitting there in the bathroom.
Yeah, that was my senior year.
Okay.
So, anyway, fast forward to end of January. So, signing day is always the first. Oh, back then it's always the first Wednesday in February. That's when National Signing Day is, right? The weekend before, USC had this big recruiting weekend. And that was going to be my official visit. So before I left on the official visit, my dad says, hey, when you come home, we're going to talk about it as a family, and we're going to decide where you're going to go. I was like, okay, cool. I never shared anybody where I wanted to go. My parents never pressured me to go anywhere, right? So anyway, I go to this trip. And, bro, when Pete Carroll was there, it was a party. It was a party there, right? It was just like Hollywood. You could imagine like how it was back then. And so I'm like, man, this is it, right? You know, this is what I dreamt of. You know, this is what I wanted to do, right? They had they rolled the carpet, the red carpet out and all that, right? Anyway, I go home. We sit down as a family on Sunday, and my dad says, okay, son, where you want to go? I said, Dad, I'm going to go to USC. So, okay, cool. Simple, bro. So, okay, cool. Make sure you pray about it. So, all right, yeah, I'll do that. My high school was an hour and a half from where we lived. So we got to go to school on Monday. On our way back from school, my dad asked me, so you still solid on SC? I said, yeah, I'm still solid. He said, did you pray about it yet? I said, nope. He said, make sure you pray about it. I said, yeah, I will. We go to school the next day on Tuesday. Less than 24 hours before I sign on that one, the next day on Wednesday. Less than 24.
Up till that close, you were SC.
I was SC, solid. I'm in English class, and we're watching Dead Poet Society. Seen the movie?
Oh, yeah. It'll change your life.
Yes. So all I could get from the movie was there's this young boy who wanted to be a poet or an artist or something like that, but his dad wants him to be something else. And I'm like looking at this boy, and I'm like, hey, that's kind of like me. Not that my dad wanted me to go somewhere. It was just like, oh, this coach wants me to go here. My uncles want me to go here. So I'm being pulled in so many different directions, right? So in the middle of class, bro, swear, I just pull my seat out like this, and I just say a quick prayer. Simple. Heavenly Father, like, I want to go to SC. Is that the right place for me? In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. Right when I say amen, my phone rings. It's vibrating. I look at it. It's my dad. I'm in class. I let it go to voicemail. But when the voicemail pops up, I kind of bend down, and I'm listening to it, right? And my dad just simply says, nothing crazy. He says, hey, just letting you know Notre Dame coaches this email. Just want to wish you good luck tomorrow. They know that wherever you go, that you'll make a difference, whatever. So, to that effect, right? I go up to athletic office after class was done, and my head coach, Coach Kaleane, his dad, Charlie Ane, is in the USC Football Hall of Fame. So I walk into his office, and I'm excited, right? I'm like, yes, he sits me down and says, okay, where are we going tomorrow? I tell him, I say, hey, coach, I'm going to go to USC. And my coach is already a kind of like low-key guy, but I'm like expecting some sort of reaction, right? Some sort of excitement. And then he kind of just looks at me and says, oh, okay. And I was like, what do you think? He's like, well, who else was it down to? I was like, well, like it's kind of always SC, but if there was anybody else, Notre Dame. He said, oh, okay. I said, well, what do you think? He was like, well, I think congratulations. You just seem like a Notre Dame type of guy. I was like, I don't know what that means, but thanks, coach. You know what I mean? And so I left. Right next door was Mr. Holden, Tom Holden. He's the athletic director at that time. I think he went to Ohio State. Very energetic guy, right? I walk in. He's like, man, what's up, man? White guy. What's up, man? Where are we going tomorrow? I said, Mr. Holden, I'm going to go to USC. He's like, oh, man, congratulations, right? Energetic. He's like, who else was it down to? I said, oh, well, if anybody like Notre Dame. He's like, oh, bro, let me tell you about the Notre Dame alum, man. They were everywhere. they like run everything, bro. Like they're everywhere. Like, you can run into a Notre Dame and they're everywhere. But you know, USC got a good alumni program too. Like the alumni, I was like, all right, Mr. Holden. So I walk out of there in the last office. Sat a man named Gary Satterwhite. He was the track coach, black guy, and I called him Uncle G because he was one of those guys who took care of me while I was over there. So I walk in there and I sit on the couch, and he looks at me and he's like, "What's up, Neff?" And I was like, "Man, I don't know." He said, "What's on your mind?" And I told him, I was like, "Man, I came in here, I was solid on SC. I walk into Coach Colley's office. He tells me, you know, I seem more like a Notre Dame type of guy. I walk into Mr. Holden, and he starts talking about Notre Dame alum and all of this. I said, man, I don't know. He says, well, you know I love you, right? I said, yeah, I know you love me. He said, you're going to go. He didn't say you can't go. He said, you're going to go to USC. He said, you're going to go to USC and be the next Troy Polamalu. You're going to be the next Junior Seau. You're going to be the next Ray Maualuga. You're going to be the next great Polynesian football player. I just always thought you'd go to a place like Notre Dame and be the only Manti Te'o. And, bro, I know you've had times in your life where God just, that was that. And it was so clear to me that even when I got the answer, it wasn't the answer I wanted. But it was so clear, bro, that my dad came and picked me up at the end of school. We're on our way home. We're halfway through the hour-and-a-half drive, and my dad is going through the logistics of the next day. He said, okay, so when we get to the convention center, we're going to have the hats and this and that and that. And in the middle of him talking, I was like, I'm not going to SC. Bro, he whips the car on the side of the road. I said, what? I said, yeah, Dad. Keep in mind now, I'm saying this sad. I said, I'm not going to SC. He said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to go to Notre Dame. And he smiled. He's like, you prayed about it, didn't you? I said, yep. And he's just like, I'm proud of you. All right, Notre Dame it is. So the next morning on our way up to the convention center, which was an hour from where we lived, I called the USC coaches. So I made sure I called every school that offered me to say thank you, but no thank you.
Wow.
The only two that I didn't was USC and Notre Dame.
Okay.
So I called.
By the way, real quick, I don't want to interrupt the story, but did you go visit BYU? Were you?
Yeah,
were they?
I
if you were to put them in a, were they even in the top five?
They were in my top five.
Okay.
So my top five was USC, Notre Dame, UCLA, Stanford, and BYU.
And then Utah, a little below that.
Yeah, Utah was below that. But we get into the car. It's like 6 a.m. and I call Coach Pete Carroll up, and he's like, "Hey, man, you know." Oh, and I'm like, "Hey, Coach, man," and I say, "Hey, I just wanted to call you." And before I even could start, he's like, "No, don't tell me, no." I was like, "Coach, I just wanted to say thank you." He's like, "But, I'm choosing to go elsewhere." And then when I told him where I was going to go, I said, "I'm going to go to Notre Dame, bro." Him and Coach Ken Norton at that time.
Okay.
And they start just leaning in on me. They're like, well, you're not going to do anything there. Like, they're going to ruin your career, blah, blah, blah. Bro, I talked to them from the time I left my house, an hour till I got to the convention center, till I got out of the car.
Wow.
All the way till right before I walked into the door to sign the letter of intent. And he was still going in, right? And
by the way, props to you, because that's so hard to make those calls.
Yeah,
most kids would not do it, you know?
Yeah, and so, bro, I remember right where I was like, Coach, I got to go. He's like, no. And I was like, I'll see you next fall. And I hand it to my mom, and my mom gets on the phone, and I don't know what he said to my mom, but my mom doesn't cuss. And she's the sweetest lady. But I remember she started to tear up, and she was like, well, good luck to you, Coach. And she hung it up. And she looked at me, she's just like, you better F him up for 4 years. And I looked at him, I was like, I don't know what you said to my mama, but
she doesn't say that.
Yeah, she doesn't cuss, right? And so I walk in there, bro, and I sign my letter of intent to the University of Notre Dame, and I just was like, okay, Heavenly Father, thy will be done. And the way that I see my life, only God could do that. You know, and I'm grateful that I was wise enough and mature enough to follow through with the answer that I got. So, yeah.
It's beautiful, man.
Thanks, bro.
Thanks for sharing all that.
Thanks, bro.
All right, my man.
Thanks, brother. Thanks, Jim.